Hey, welcome to episode 1 of BFF with Paran and Friends. We have a couple of things going on here, so I thought I'll tell you upfront. It'll also keep me clear in terms of what I want to say to you. Number one, we have this crazy cool contest that can make you win 5 books, which are handpicked by me, simply by subscribing. That's simple. What those 5 books are, I will tell you at the end of the episode, but they are non-fiction, self-help, personal development, self-improvement, that space. Watch out for that. The second thing is what we are starting today on the very first episode is our book of the month. Pradip Chanda's The Final Cut. Victor Banerjee has this to say. Touche was a steak joint we haunted on Warden Road where Pradip and Preeti once wooed and sizzled together. Pradip was a multifaceted and talented young genius of the new consumer marketing world, and I wasn't surprised to receive his manuscript while I sat lazily in the autumn sun of the Himalaya. His writing is laid back and casual, and his angst and empathy and humor have evolved just like I'd expect from an erudite Bengali Padralok. You'll love leafing and living through an unfinished story that I'm sure will one day be completed with a touching and telling epilogue by his grandchild Tara. And that brings us to Tara Chanda, who is Pradip Chanda's granddaughter and has written the beautiful foreword for the book. I'll let you read the opening of that, but I just want to read the last para. It says, I hope this book manages to capture and transport you to my happy home and what has made it what it is today. However, most of all, I hope you get to love my grandmother through the loving and fond retelling of her by my grandfather, because I sure did. This is so beautifully written, a forward. My memory of my grandmother are recreated stories through the medium of pictures. Her passing away when I was not even 1 led to me not being able to know her, understand her, and remember her. This book has brought my grandmother to life for me. Listen, I want to go back to the story from the very beginning in terms of how it happened. I know you write about it, but I'd love to hear it from you.
No, of course. I think I wanted to say that in the forward as well because that is what it is true. I mean, I didn't really spend too much. I didn't get to spend any time with my grandmother, time which I can remember. And when there was one day when we were spring cleaning the house, so I think it was before we were moving, and Dadu had found like a couple of pages of his manuscript that he'd started writing many, many years ago. And he'd given it to me just as a, take a look, like this is something I'd done. And I was just really moved by the first couple of pages because, I mean, I've grown up with him around every single year and I've never seen such an emotional side as well. So it really, it touched me in that way. And then I bugged him for ages to continue with it and stick with it. And I'm glad I did because it led to this beautiful book that he's written now.
Let me begin by asking you, in terms of getting to know your grandfather, pre you reading The Final Cut, to now how you feel you know him, what would be like the difference? Like, right, you knew Dadu, granddad, but I'm sure there is a different interpretation in your own heart about the man.
I would not say necessarily there's a different interpretation. He's still the same stubborn person that he is, that is also shown in the book. But like I said before, I think there's a couple of like more emotional parts which you do not realize and you do not understand because I did not also see his relationship with my grandmother in person. So in that ways, yes, it is. He's different on page than he is that I have seen him. But other than that, I think he still has the same qualities that he has always had, and it's shown in the book with his he's an elegant speaker and he writes his thoughts down really well. I think that's one thing that I've always noticed. Creatively, he's always been miles ahead whenever he's writing anything down, and you can just really see that on the page. But again, he's still stubborn and in my Dadu in those kind of ways. Still the same person, I know.
Fair enough. You use the word different, and I am a voracious reader, and I've been reading
the final cut. And that's one word that jumps at you, in fact, that, this is a very different sort of story, a different style of narration. What's your take on that, Tara?
I think it's definitely very different in terms of, I think it gives us a in-depth, it's I understand it comes off as like an autobiography of sorts, but it's more like you follow a journey, and the journey is not only his, but it's theirs together. And I think that it gives more, then it goes more to the romance section as well, but also adventure, because when he talks about his childhood, so I think in that way it's quite different because it's a mix of multiple things altogether. So along with an autobiography, it turns into a novel and into a story which you like to read, and you walk through everything together. So yeah, definitely.
And what did you feel about knowing about the years or the decades that you were not even born yet, the 60s, 70s? In fact, I would imagine you to be a Gen Z. So let's detach from the grandfather for a second. As a Gen Z reading this book, what were some of the experiences, some of the things that were almost insights about life that was back in the day?
Yeah, well, I think definitely in terms of also an outlook on India before now, and the India in which they had growing up, with the little anecdotes that Dadu always has about school, at least in his growing up, about school, about the coffee shops that you used to go out and speak about philosophy, which I've heard a lot about, and all kinds of things about when he tried to enlist in the army, stuff like that, like all of his little stories. I think it just really gives a deeper insight into what it was like before social media, before, and it gives a personal touch. Obviously you've heard about all of this beforehand, and you hear about stories from other people, but I think the way he narrates it gives a certain personal touch, which, or a little humor to it, which really gives you different perspective on the entire thing.
You, as a reader, whatever your experience was, that you felt would be like a takeaway for life, something that you could sort of build upon from having read this book?
I think you have to look at Dadu's like go-getter attitude. I think he's had a lot of different difficulties in life as well, and also the way, like did not finish did not go to college and stuff like that, and the fact that he still made it to where he is today. Very impressive positions, and he kind of like, it's about, if you don't try, you don't get. At least that is what I got from some of the particular instances when he talked about his work and his working climate. And I don't, and some of the rough drafts that I saw, they were a lot more detailed. But that really just really shows I think that's the philosophy behind it, which you're talking about. I think it's more that you keep trying until you get there, and you do not give up after hardship. Because I mean, he's published multiple books after that, and he still had, after unfortunately after my grandmother's passing and stuff, and he's done great. He's a voracious traveler, multiple books. He does his consulting on the side, loves reading, spends time with all of us. So I think it just shows that you know you get over hardships and you continue, and I think it's really shown all throughout the book.
Are you somebody who considers yourself like a reader of books, or is this an exception that you made because it is Granddad's
No,
book?
no, no. I used to be a voracious reader when I was younger. However, that did slow down a considerable lot. But during COVID, when Dalu started rewriting his book, I was his editor for quite a few months before he got a proper one. I do read now and again, but his book, obviously, I will read anytime possible.
I'm sure I'd say you're a very proper editor then, because I still haven't found a typo or any
Okay,
grammatical
maybe
error.
not
So,
that. I was a little bit of that type of an editor, but it was more that I had to tell him to cut down on all the rambling details.
oh,
he
that's
had a
important,
couple,
I guess.
he had a couple of rambling pages, and I had to tell him, okay, I think we're digressing a little bit. So that was more my job, but it ended up being great in the end. So I'm glad.
Yeah, because from the perspective of it being engaging, having different locations coming in situations, the pacing of the book I find very, very engaging, and you want to, once you start getting into the flow, want to kind of stay with it. That's my experience of it so far, and I've not completed it, to be honest, yet.
Yeah. It's also, I think, for someone who is not Indian, perhaps, taking a look at it really gives a nice background into, old India in terms of, and also a personal experience of someone who's lived there day to day, which is not like a historical perspective or something like that. So it's kind of like a bit of a Ruskin Bond look, where he gives, when he gives his Missouri adventures, or he writes through other people, but it's for people who do not live in India, who have not experienced that. It really just gives that depth, and that happens same with Dadu with Calcutta. I think he also gives a certain depth into what old Calcutta was like for the people who are interested to learn.
Fantastic. It's been so good interacting with you, and
You too. Thank you very much.
you are truly your grandfather, granddaughter in terms of how
Yeah.
erudite you are, how well spoken and articulate you are, Tara. It's been
Thank you
a
very
pleasure
much.
talking to you.
Tara Chanda, granddaughter of our featured author Pradip Chanda, as part of our Book of the Month, which is The Final Cut. You can find it, by the way, on Amazon. So go read it. If you do, tell us in the comments what you feel about it. Which brings us to our contest. All you got to do is subscribe to win Paran's pick, the 5 books quickly, how to win friends and influence people, what to say when you talk to yourself, the Japanese secret to a long and happy life. You know this one, Ikigai. Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a... and Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money. One of you is going to win all 5. How about that? All you've got to do is subscribe. Yep, do it right now. Press the bell icon if you want a notification every time we post a video or when we get into the next episode of the podcast. For now, thank you very much for watching. Book Friends Forever, BFF with Paran and Friends. See you soon.